Everybody's got so quiet. All right. I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 5th, 2020 meeting of the Delaware County Board of Commissioners. Brian Gallagher, would you lead us in the pledge, please, sir?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you, Brian. I'm Jeff Benton, President of the Board. To my right is our Vice President, Gary Merrill, and our Administrator, Mike Cromer. To my left is fellow Commissioner Barb Lewis, and our clerk today, Sarah DeNova. So we can begin.
Resolution number 20-210, in the matter of approving the electronic record of proceedings from regular meeting held February 27th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Vote?
Vote on motion 20-210. Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
We do have public comment this morning.
Okay. Welcome, let's see, Jim Shaw from the Ohio Attorney General's office. Welcome to Delaware County and our session.
Yep, always a pleasure to come up here. I just have a few things that I wanted to get out to you while I was in the area. The first is just some highlights from our office from 2019. Just goes over what we've accomplished as an office, just to keep you up to date on what we're doing. And I do have a few things I wanted to cover with you that we've been working on so far in 2020. This week is actually Consumer Protection Month, and in connection to that, our office has rolled out a tool for our robocall enforcement unit, and you can learn more about this with ohioprotects.org, that anyone can report some concerning robocalls. Beyond that, everything else is covered there, and I know I have 3 minutes, so I'll leave it at that. And thank you for your time, and as always, if there's anything you ever need from the office, please reach out to me. And once again, I love coming up here and seeing y'all, and I'll yield the rest of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank
All right.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to see Attorney General Yost getting a lot of things done. There's a lot of big things going on in the office, and good to see one of Delaware's own doing well and leading that effort. So, okay, we'll continue.
Resolution number 20-211, in the matter of approving purchase orders, then announce certificates and payments of warrants and batch number CMAPR 0304.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Vote?
Vote on motion 20-211. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Resolution number 20-212, in the matter of setting date, time for viewing for public hearing for consideration of the Davis number 240 drainage improvement petition filed by Brett Davis and others.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Vote?
Vote on motion 20-212. Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
We now have a presentation from the Delaware County Fair
All right.
and the Agricultural Society.
That leads us to the presentation. Tom Wright's going to lead it, I presume?
Maybe.
Maybe. All right, welcome everyone. Boy, the turnout's been great. To see so many folks from the Fair Board and folks associated with the fair turn out, because there's a lot of big things going on, so we're anxious to hear about it.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. And once I get through these 75, 80 slides, I'm sure we'll be fine. So,
Family slides or?
Your trip. Hey,
And some,
Eric, you
yeah,
want to grab John? We'll get
You
the
know-
lights, make it easier to see.
we've got some people in the corner too that
Oh.
can't even see.
Sandy, you
Yeah.
want to move out? We got seating up here.
Here.
Nope.
Yeah.
Fortunately, nobody's sitting in Marissa's seat other than Marissa, so. No.
There's another,
Sandy,
yeah.
you
why
can sit
don't
where I
you-
was.
yeah,
We're fine.
Are you okay, or?
Yeah.
You've seen it before, right?
Gary,
Got a reserved spot. We want-
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, good morning. Commissioner Lewis, Commissioner Benton, Commissioner Merrill, thank you very much for the opportunity for us to come before you this morning. I think it'd be fun, show of hands, those here, commissioners and/or employees of the fair. Raise your hand a little bit. There's a good group of us here this morning, so appreciate the support there. So just real quick, my name is Tom Wright, and I am the current president for an annual term of the Fair Board and also president of Little Brown Jug Society, that we work hand in hand together with the fair. If I get myself in trouble this morning and can't answer some of your questions, I'm hoping Chip or Pat can help me out, or if needed, other board members that are present. But as far as introductions, that's where we are. Real quick, and there is only 12, 14 slides, actually. Wanted to share a little bit this morning about how we got started, a little bit about our vision as a fairgrounds and a fair, a little bit about the phases that we have broken down and worked on to present this morning and to move forward with. We'll talk for a few minutes about some of the things that we feel are important moving forward. Just to make sure you're aware, we're trying to cover all our bases and look after the business at hand of how we grow this fairgrounds. And then, obviously, we're here to ask for your support this morning and answer any questions that you guys might have as well. So that's my goal this morning. As everybody, or maybe you don't, our fairgrounds was originally down in Powell, Ohio, and in 1933 we moved up to Delaware. The land was acquired through a federal grant, actually, and so that began the process. And you can see old pictures. We began with tents, and those were our structures at that point in time for the fair. And over time we grew in the late 30s, early 40s. The majority of the buildings that you see on the fairgrounds are when they were constructed. The track being done and started in 1938, which began the Little Brown Jug and brings us to where we are today as we are going to celebrate our 75th anniversary of the Brown Jug. One of the key factors that came financially from that regard was the swimming pool itself, and that was a negotiation and got an awful lot of support. If they will grant money, if in fact we house a community pool. And so for many years, up until, well, I can't remember the last time Coach Cornell ran it, but for many years, the swimming pool was there, and that is currently where we house our office for the fairgrounds. We have built several buildings over time, but we still have a number of original buildings on the grounds that are in need of repair, and simply, for a matter of fact, they're just not functional. And so that's also what's brought us to this point in the process. So to go backwards, once we began this 3.5 years ago from a bed tax perspective, we gathered as a group to see what is important for us, what is our vision, what do we want to be when we grow up, and what's our legacy as we move forward. One of our taglines was, we want to create a generation, the next generation county fair and community entertainment venue. We want to be that focal point of Delaware County, and that's important to us, and let the whole county experience those grounds. And aside from that, just the actual fair and the fairgrounds. We want to be the best in the state. We want to look the best, we want to operate the best, and we want to show ourselves off and bring people to the county, and that's critical to what we're after. So during that process of about 9-12 months, what we felt were pillars that were most important to us, and it took us a while to get to this point, but our thinking was, if it doesn't match one of our pillars, then maybe it doesn't belong on our grounds. And so that was a part of each structure and each item that we discuss and do, is how does it fall back on our pillars, which involves obviously in community engagement, harness racing excellence, agriculture support and education is critical, and then in entertainment and community events to be held on our grounds as well. So those are the things that have guided us as we've got to this point through the bed tax process, and we'll continue to do that, although, you know, we understand also over time our priorities may change as our community changes also, but we have to stay flexible. But this is important to us now as a group, and we felt it was critical. So let's talk just for a minute about what we've referred to as our phase one. We've broken this into 3 phases on our grounds to grow and get us to the next century, or what holds again. We want to go another 75 years, and how are we going to get there? So you'll see on there, just to highlight a couple of them, I'm not going to go through it line by line, but we have already spent roughly over $1.5 million on those first 3 items that you see. In the first, the infrastructure and capital improvements. I use this as an example, but 2 years ago, we had a monthly water bill that was $30,000. Okay, it's now under $5,000 in a water bill. We had so many water leaks, and that's an example of some of the infrastructure, electrically, as well as water has been an issue. Some of the others are more visible. There's an infield tote board, there's a fence around it. Those type items are visible, but is it what everybody wants to see? No, they want to see more, and we want to see more. The last one, couple items I'll draw your attention to is the Ag Center itself. We broke this apart most recently from a civil and from the actual building site. Bids have already been returned on the civil, and we will begin very shortly turning dirt. We hope in the next, I'm going to say weeks, but I may be putting somebody on the spot. But and the bids for the actual building are due back within the next couple of weeks as well. So our goal is in the spring we would hopefully begin something from that regard. The other on here is draw your attention. A couple items is harness barns. The barns that we use today are used year-round, and people train on our grounds. Traditionally, the summer at the peak, we'll have roughly 225 to 250 horses on the grounds that will train on our racetrack and our jog track. And we have a number of barns that are used year-round, and these barns obviously are revenue-producing barns for us as well. And then you'll see on here a covered arena. That is something that we feel is important as well, to attract more events that could come on in a variety of shape throughout the course of the year, and obviously we would use during the fair. So I did break it down. I listened a little bit too. I was thinking as I was at the state of the county, which I thought was really important, and this came to mind too, is to share with you how do we sustain this beyond us, and how are we going to pay the electric and water bill for these new buildings and so forth. And so with each of these phases, I'll show a projection of revenue that we can anticipate as well, which carries us beyond the time frame when the buildings get built, so we can maintain them and continue to grow the grounds. So this first phase, as we forecasted, I believe is very light, but it's a first-year forecast that we worked on to get to these projections. To me, the center one is pretty simple because it's a known entity. They're just going to move barns, and yes, the price will go up as well, but we'll be very competitive with what other grounds are charging for all our buildings. We've done that research. So a couple of quick pictures of the grounds or the buildings that we're talking about. This picture is of the new Ag Center, which would sit right on top where the Junior Fair building used to sit. Let me get this one there. That is a rough sample of a covered arena. This would be located on the western portion of the grounds, as close to the old armory, if you will, in that direction on the grounds. And we'll talk a little bit because it comes with two phases, one being open air like you see, and then eventually being a covered, so therefore it's used 12 months a year throughout the year. This is a drawing of one of the 4 horse barns, harness horse barns on the backside. Again, I think if you look at this one and the first one, what's important also as we've gone through this process is we want modern buildings that are useful, but at the same time we want to maintain the heritage and tradition that is important to us. So that's our goal with all the architecture, and for that to be architecturally, structurally, have a look and feel with each of the buildings that we have proposed, and we'll talk about. So phase 2, I'm not going to go line by line. It would be the addition, and you'll see on the left, those are structures that are revenue generating, and on the right would be what we would refer to as non-generating improvements to the grounds. But it's important to recognize which ones do and which ones do not generate revenue. I also think it's important, though, as a group, we recognize we are not a not-for-profit necessarily. We're following a 501c3. So our goal is not necessarily money. Our goal is to impact the community. But we also understand we have to generate income in order to maintain those properties and keep them moving forward. So that's why you'll see we've broken these down into 2 sections. I don't need to go item by item, but you'll see the rest. Those additional harness barns, as an example, that would fulfill us. Each barn being 50 stalls gets us to 200 stalls, which is about where we really need to be, 225. So anyways, and please stop me if a question comes up on any of these. Don't hesitate. But again, phase 2, just under $14 million. an initial forecast of $380,000 annually in revenue from those structures to help maintain them. And then Phase 3, again, I don't need to go through them, but this is an indication, and we've worked with the city as well in this process, but in this case, you'll see even replacing the fence all the way around the outside and the sidewalk that runs up and down Pennsylvania Avenue. And the other one on here that I think a couple of things worth mentioning, at the bottom on the left, the Coliseum upgrade and arts and crafts. Again, we are trying to maintain our heritage of where we came from. I think especially that Coliseum is, it needs a lot of work, a ton of work, but it is a landmark one of the landmarks, I would say, to me, right after the grandstand. I'm biased, but right after the grandstand, I would say the Coliseum is one of the more visible buildings that we have on the grounds that are important to us. So anyways, things that we're thinking about as we move forward, and I don't need to go through line by line, but as we begin this process, we have already started or have in motion many of these items that are on here. We're going to get to the point where we need to market our grounds. We'll have a marketing manager in because there's going to be that much activity that is generated from this. And we want to bring more and more people to Delaware, to the fairgrounds. And they'll come from inside and outside the county as well. You'll see on here Committee 51, Mike is chairing. And we've already begun the process of getting ourselves in line. What do our contracts read? What are some of the venues that we might want to bring to the fairgrounds that are important to us? And so they're already thinking about those things and reaching out to where they need to be. We're just trying to be proactive as we go through this process and set ourselves up for success. We talked about consistency. I'll answer any questions on financing. Tiffany and myself have spent a fair amount of time with different lending programs. Obviously, we're generating annual revenue and here to talk about the next 15 years, but we want to impact a lot of it more sooner than the full 15 years. So in some cases, from financing of these, we will use cash that is available. Our first building, as an example, will be the Ag Center will be used 100% cash. In that case, other buildings, we want to begin the process of doing more than one building at a time. So financing will become a part of that, and we've got things in place that will help us from that regard. So there'll be a combination of both financing and use of cash as we go through this. Zoning has already been taking place, in particular on the city side. As everybody knows, the front half of the fairgrounds is located in the city, the back half is located in the county. But we've worked well with the city on rezoning of the property, which goes back, as everybody has read, many years. That there's residential plots where the junior fair building sat today on the books. So we had to go through a rezoning process, which has worked well. And then lastly, we're working well with the state as well. We've had a good deal of folks come to the Little Brown Jug, several state office holders, and they have thoroughly enjoyed it. And they're supporting us through legislation as well down there. So I'll read one more, and then I'll answer your questions. Because I read this morning over coffee, and I thought it was interesting because I got my issue of March 2020's Hoofbeats, which is, okay, I'm biased, I'm a horse guy. But I thought it was interesting because they interview a single page. In this case, it was Jody Jameson. Jody is Canadian, originally from Nova Scotia. And they ask a number of questions, and I thought it was important. They were celebrating the fact that Jody had won his 8,000th race behind in a sulky. And if you think about it, in horsemen's terms, if they're doing really good, he's going to win 25% of the time. That's really good. So put that in perspective. Jody has started 36,000 races. He's been in the sulky. And the question that they ask, tell us about your most memorable race of your career. And his answer, the Little Brown Jug, with Tell All in 2007. To go down there as a Canadian kid and conquer it. Not many Canadians go down there, Delaware, Ohio. Maybe 3 in the last 10 years. So the reason I brought that up to me, I thought it was really interesting and timely from the magazine, but at the same time, our grounds in our event goes beyond Delaware County, and we're reaching, in this case, Nova Scotia. So we have to keep that in mind too, and that's the tradition, and part of that as well is the Little Brown Jug, and our grounds in general. So I think as we think about this, and as you think about this and taking us to the next generation, we go beyond where we are today, and we far reach outside Delaware County. So in summary, the three phases that we showed you are just under $43 million in improvements. In this case, would be continuing over the next, what would be the next 16 years. We'll initially, revenues generating a little bit over $1 million, but as it was passed in the House and put back to the county commissioners to approve the move forward of this bed tax and the opportunity to extend it for an additional 15 years. And so as the Fair Board members and hopefully everybody in this room wants to see us grow and continue. So we're here today to ask you for that, to move our grounds forward and support all 15 years and approve that at one time today, and ask for your help together to make us grow forward. So that's why we're here. I'll answer any, if somebody has any questions, I'd be happy to, but that's why we're here. Questions? Thoughts?
Mike?
The capital program you have laid out, where you do many upgrades to existing facilities, build new stuff, those are very complicated, and cost control and accurately estimating is really challenging. Once again, I've been doing a lot of design and construction projects for the last 25 years, and just because you think upgrading this bathroom is going to cost you $100,000, it could easily be $300,000. I think that with your plan, your $42 million could easily turn into $60 if the proper planning and is not done. It could conversely be 35 or 36
Exactly.
if you do it. I think a lot of it is engaging contractors through some alternative delivery models and things like that. So once again, I know you guys are more focused up front, but I think managing the planning, design, and construction of this is going to be extremely key. And I know the first project out of the gate, some of the costs and things like that. So anyway, I wanted to kind of, it's exciting, and I don't mean to be the wet blanket, but as an engineer, that's kind of what you do sometimes. But I think that with this program, that'd be really good to see, how you plan to attack that.
That's a great point, Mike, and we learned the hard way right out of the chute, as you may know, and that is that first Ag Center. And we had forecasted a cost in one direction, and it came back in a different. And so we adjusted how we go forward with those, and we'll continue to do so. But I mean, we've got a couple of good folks on our board, Pat and John as an example, that have been through this and have that experience as well. So that's critical, but also hiring some outside support as well will really take us to where we need to be also.
Yeah.
Good question, though. Others?
I have a couple questions, observations, or whatever. The revenue you're talking about generating, the 1.21, that's over the 15-year period?
That's annually.
Annually? Mm-hmm. When it's all up and running?
What we've initially, that 1.1 million is the sum of the first year of those buildings. It should grow more than that dramatically, I would hope.
Okay. In doing my math off the top of my head, the 43, it kind of goes along with Mike's comment. It's really hard to determine what something's going to cost at this point. The 43 million, and I guess you probably got about 8 million in those first 5 years. That sound about right?
More like 9.
9, okay. So and somewhere I think 48 million is what the 15 years theoretically was going to, is that, I think you did some work on that, or?
Yeah, it's above 40 million, but again, it's,
But again, it's a
Depends on the
moving
assumption.
target, so I don't think the request for 15 years is out of line, because I do think that money that you're projecting, plus the unexpected, probably going to be somewhere in the ballpark. The question I do have, if we get through all these projects, and in a perfect world, it's done, it's perfect. If we were to approve the 15 years, it can be reduced back to 14 or 13 or 12 or whatever. Yeah, I think it helped give some reassurance to commissioners and to the taxpayers. We could just know what that would mean. So he'll get us an answer on that. I applaud the work that you did. I thought it was very clear, and I'm excited about what we're talking about doing at the fair, and I see no reason why I can't support it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really appreciate the presentation and setting the goals, and I realize that some of the financial data are estimates, and I think, the points are Mike's points, and everyone's well taken about the planning and the engineering phases, but I would support the 15-year
you,
extension.
Commissioner Lewis.
It
Appreciate it.
really, there's so many things, so many buildings that need to be upgraded, and I remember a few years ago, I think it was Chip who came in and told us about the water bills, and, 1933. So there's a lot of money and a lot of work that has to be put into to be the next generation county fairgrounds. So I applaud everybody for their hard work too on the board, because I imagine you have many hours of discussions and meetings, and to Sandy too, and Don and the staff. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. First, a small one, that is, what you didn't mention the Merchants Building. What's the future plans for the
Merchants Building is in Phase 3.
Would be
I budget-
renovated?
Be renovated,
Okay.
yes. Yep.
Would it be converted to a year-round building? Is that what you're thinking? Okay.
And it's important, Jeff, when you say that too, though, because, from an expense side too, we can't go out and heat and cool every building. That doesn't make sense economically.
right.
So it's important that we pick and choose where those are and what's critical. As an example, arts and craft would not be in that situation.
Right. The barns are quite a bit bigger in bigger size, bigger dollars than what last I was aware of. What drove that change? Why did you change that?
John will probably answer it better than I. Similar to the Ag Center building, I think is a good way to put it. We learned a great deal, and John put a lot more time into understanding from a square footage what is the true cost of what we're trying to accomplish, and so it grew immensely. Size and shape of them didn't change. They're 12 by 12 stalls and there's offices in them, and there's wash stalls in them and so forth, so they can be restrooms. But one of the other things that's important too, just like all the horse barns and all of our buildings, for example, the horse barns with the stalls are not necessarily permanent fixtures. So if at some point down the road we don't have that many horses on the ground, we can remove the stalls, and it becomes a very large open span building at the same time. So we want to make sure we're designing those properly to not only think of now, but maybe 20 years from now, what does it look like and how do we use those buildings? So.
Okay. Would the barns be year-round buildings then?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
If you go up now, it's not the prettiest, and that's part of it, but our barns now are referred to as shed row barns, allowing the door and the horses to hang their head out, which is really important from a county fair aspect, but in the middle of winter, it's not very conducive for the animals. So you'll see a lot of plastic, and looks like people used to screen in their screen-in porch or cover their screen-in porch with plastic. Same concept over the winter. These would be year-round, yes, and that is really important.
Yeah.
We have a few folks that actually head south, and I think having year-round barns would make it more appealing, because it's very expensive to ship a whole bunch of horses to Florida.
Sure.
And if we had year-round barns, we'll get a lot more that would stay and utilize our grounds the rest of the year.
The existing barns would be knocked down, I
Yes.
assume, and that's where the new barns would go?
Exactly.
Okay, no, that's what we were thinking
Far-
before.
And today, we probably have training barns, I'm wrong, but 8 to 10. And when we're done, we'll have 5. One that is existing right now, and then the 4 new ones. Everything else
Jug and jugette barns
would stay.
stayed as
And
is.
traditionally, we'd like to just use it as overflow versus a year-round facility for somebody, because they do take their wear and tear on them, and they originally weren't designed for that. But
One of the, again, I applaud wholeheartedly everyone who's been involved in this. I know it's a labor of love, and commitment to the community to advance this plan. I know you guys have been working extremely hard on this, and I love it. I mean, I think it's going to be great. But I think one of the key things that I think you've been wrestling with and I wrestle with is how fast do we do this? Because we could do it faster if we bonded or borrowed or some combination thereof, and it's, with the revenue streams of the existing levy and the renewal, that makes it very feasible. So I guess in a ideal world, we'd all love to have this done next year. Obviously, it's not practical, but could we accelerate this if we had a 15-year extension or renewal, and that revenue stream guaranteed, and use that to borrow and build everything faster, which generates revenue faster, which actually would save on construction costs, presumably.
Yes.
Construction costs will continue to escalate. What's the thinking behind, on that idea?
Yeah, good question, really good question. We've debated back and forth, and actually, we're having more hours. This Saturday, we're having a retreat, and that would be a priority of that meeting, and that is setting, you'll see phases 1, 2, and 3, and so therefore it's initial phases of how we roll these buildings out, and we want to sharpen that even more, even on Saturday. How do we accelerate the process, but yet be smart at how we do it? Who knows when we start and we build our first 3 buildings, 4 buildings, and then all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, that's not going to fit. Or, wait a minute, it now makes more sense to do X versus Y, and so we may have to adjust. So I would agree. My initial thought, and I get pushback sometimes, is each phase could take easily 24 to 36 months to complete. I would, is that realistic? I believe that's realistic. Could it push to 48 to 60 months in each phase? Yes. But our goal would be like yours. That's where we talked about getting multiple projects running at one time, having a project coordinator, what you might refer to as an owner's rep, to keep us on task and keep moving forward with multiple projects at one time.
Yeah, it would be extremely difficult to have a volunteer, lead this sort of massive
Yes.
effort to get all these major projects done quickly. I mean,
Absolutely.
So I understand that. Another topic, and I think, this is probably the one I get the most questions about, is the grandstand. We didn't go into any detail on that. Grandstand needs a lot of work. Elevators, restrooms, electrical work, and I know we've applied for state capital budget funding, and that looks promising at this point. So what are your thoughts on that?
Get it started, that one would be get it started as quick as we can. It's roughly 2.2, no, 1 million and 3, so 2.6 million, isn't it? 2.6.
Yeah, 2.6.
To add a great deal to it, from underneath to ADA compliance, from some of those to ventilation of the facility, to physically redoing some of what the actual structure is, to electrical. Obviously, we've already have a price for a new restroom. Restroom alone will be, back to Gary and Michael's point, we originally quoted it as a little in excess of $300,000, and I wouldn't be surprised if it goes higher for a restroom. But obviously, that is something that dates back to the 1930s, and we hear that quite often. So that is a critical part of the equation, and actually not a part of that dollar number that you see up there, because it's tied to the state, although matching funds is part of that discussion in there.
Yep.
I do have.
Yeah.
The timeline, I realize there's going to be overlap phase 1, overlap phase 2, but one's not going to be finished before the next one starts. I guess I am kind of a little curious how you guys see that lining out. Phase 1's going to be year 1 to year whatever, your phase 2 is going to be year 3 to, in a perfect world, when you see that third phase being finished, 15 years or 10 years?
I would certainly hope it would be less than 10 years.
Okay.
Would be a goal. Hopefully less than that. I mean, and each building, though, keep in mind, each building can be totally different. I mean, this first building is probably our most complex and difficult building because it's got so much multi-use going inside of it. We're taking our fair office, and that's included. We're taking the Hall of Fame, and that's included, and then an open area as well. So that structure is very complex. It's heated, it's cooled, versus, don't take this the wrong way, a horse barn is a lot simpler to build and can be done a lot faster. So those things also go into that timeline equation.
And I do have a observation which does not affect my vote in any form. I think you've got to be, and I may disagree with my fellow commissioner, I think you've got to be careful in doing too much too quickly, because I guarantee you'll make mistakes. Or you'll build something, so man, if I'd have known that, we'd have done this one differently. So I think there is an argument to be made for maybe not sprinting, but maybe not walking either, but finding a natural time frame that protects you against unintended mistakes. And I am not here to suggest what that time frame is, just to make that verbal statement of think about that as you go through the process.
I think, and that's a really good point. And one of the things, for example, we don't claim to be experts either. And especially, we've got a couple folks that are very experienced in construction, but also, what's the usage? As an example, I spent, number of hours with 3 or 4 different horse trainers as you look at the barns. What is important to you, and what space is important, and what are the needs of each of those? And I think, I know Mike has spent a great deal of time as we looked at a covered arena from a size perspective, and where do you put stands, and where do you put a judge's stand, and ask a lot of those questions, even going down to the state fair and asking those questions. So I think it's important that we take the opinion of others and take that into consideration as we go through this process. To your point, we planned on X, and it's changed now, Gary, and now it's Y, and this is why what happened. So that's a really good point.
Do you have any additional land acquisition plans in this 3-phase plan?
Initially, we did, and we felt it best to remove that. So likely the best place, if any, for us to go, I would assume, Pat, is north. The other option, who knows what's going to happen with the Armory building. That was always some discussion as well. What are they going to do with it? That was one. We originally talked about where the apartments sit, which is really behind the fair office. I think it just doesn't make economic sense to go through that process. That would be far-reaching.
Very expensive. Yeah, okay.
Well, I would suggest that we ask our administrator, and the question I asked, get a resolution put together that we can comment on and vote on potentially.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you clearly have my support as well. And I think a 15-year extension makes sense, and for a couple of reasons. One is the certainty. We don't have to rely on future commissions to address this, and it enables the Fair Board to have a very certain revenue stream that will help them with bonding or borrowing, whichever, or combination, whichever way you go, if you go that way. And can get things done faster and more reliably, and you have a certain revenue stream that enables these things to be truly planned and then executed. So I think 15-year makes a lot of sense. The analyses I've done shows that the $42 million should be supported by the planned revenue streams, with just modest growth. We do have several hotels in the planning process right now, which will just add to that revenue growth. So again, I think that the $42 million, I don't know that number is going to change, but the $42 million is not unreasonable by any means in conjunction with how much revenue should be generated from this bed tax, assuming we go 15 years. And then again, I'd just like to wrap up. Commissioner Lewis, you had any other comments?
No, I think we should go ahead with
Move forward with the
resolution.
the efforts to get this on the, Eric, what is the process, if you could, according to the legislation?
All you have to do is adopt a resolution, and it is subject to a referendum period.
Okay. The referendum period's how long?
30 days.
30 days. Okay. So we could do a resolution next meeting, next 2 meetings, something in that range?
Yeah, we could. I believe the opinion I gave was that you would just want to make sure that you had it done early enough that you could meet that referendum deadline without
Before-
pushing it into the following year. So
Right,
anytime within the next 2 months will be sufficient.
okay.
And again, my comment regarding the question about the length, I fully expect it'll take the 15 years, but our responsibility, our fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers, if in fact, for some reason it didn't because money came in quicker, I think we at least should be aware of what the process is to shorten that time period, if in fact that became an issue. Not suggesting for a second it would, but out of the responsibility to the taxpayers, I think it's a question we need clarity on.
Yep, good point.
So I guess, in conclusion, I'll just wrap up by saying thank you all again for not only today's presentation, but all the work that you've done on getting this moving forward. And the question, Tom?
No, and
Comment?
it was a good point on record. We did have a lot of support on the state level, as we talked about, and
Sure.
several of our local, Chris Jordan is supporting, and Andy Brenner, and Rick Carfagna, and actually, Speaker of the House, Mr. Householder, has been a huge supporter of ours in this process. So just wanted to, on the record, I think that's a good point, Chip.
No,
Thank you.
That is a very good point. This legislation wouldn't have been possible without, of course, Chip leading the charge, but also obviously the support of the Jim Beakey, Householder, Andy, Rick, Chris. There have been a lot of people working on this to make it possible. But having grown up here, I realize from my very early days that how important the Little Brown Jug is to Delaware, and it is truly an international event. I mean, once you get kind of engaged in it, you realize, oh my gosh, there are people from Australia that come to this thing every year, and Canada, England. I mean, it's truly an international event. It puts Delaware, front and center, every fall, and it's just a, great thing for Delaware. So putting this plans together just ensures that will continue, and we'll be able to expand it and attract other events and other other projects. It's just really neat that we can transform the fairgrounds into what we all want, to have the best fairgrounds and entertainment venue in the state. And I think we're on the verge of doing that.
As I describe it, it's a very tired fair. It's a polite way of saying it.
It is.
But I think we all know what we're talking about. And this is going to be great for the whole county, the whole area. And to your point, the elected officials that we just stated played a big role in getting,
Yes.
we hope, this money approved. So they do deserve a kudos. So I'm glad you guys all came to show your support. Much appreciated.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for having us.
Thanks
We
for
sure do
everybody.
appreciate you.
Okay,
Thank you.
I think that's it for today then. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.
Tom, I have a favor to ask. I'm presenting to Willowbrook this afternoon. Is it possible to get a copy of those slides? There's a couple of them I would like to show. Marissa, the young lady across the hall there, she's the one that's going to put the slides together. Could you just tell her that? Could you just go ask her? I'm sure she can.
Marissa?
Marissa, she's standing right,
She has a green dress.
right across the hallway there. One with the ag building is very
Oh,
impressive.
yeah.
I think they've.
The barns. I haven't seen a rendering of the barns
I didn't
yet.
intend to show that, but I could go through those quickly.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Which Willowbrook are you going to?
Willowbrook,
East, west?
West.
Okay. My mom's at south.
Bob Gaffey, Rotary asked me to do this a couple months ago.
Good. Okay. Well, Kristen, I assume your request isn't nearly as dramatic as that one.
Nor is lengthy.
Yeah.
Resolution number 20-213, in the matter of accepting the award of the 2020 Technology Grant and Supplemental Appropriation for the Delaware County Common Pleas General Court Division.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Good morning, Commissioners. Kristen Schultz from the Delaware County Common Pleas Court General Division. Today, we are asking that you accept the award of the 2020 Technology Grant and also do a supplemental appropriation. This is a grant that we were awarded by the Supreme Court of Ohio. It's a small amount, $5,760, and the idea being that we would implement with our current court case management system an outgoing text message system, and this would be directly to criminal defendants. This is a low-cost measure, and I think it's a step in the direction that the court needs to take. what it does, what often happens is if a defendant fails to appear for a hearing, a warrant is issued, that person's arrested, they're held in our jail, we have to have another hearing on it. So there's a lot of implications if the defendant just didn't get it on his calendar for whatever reason. So this is easy, low cost. I'm excited about to see how our failure to appear rate would improve over the next year, and then hopefully look to expand it, at least maintain that aspect of it, and maybe expand it down the road. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay? Vote?
Vote on motion 20-213. Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mr. Bitton?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.
Resolution number 20-214, in the matter proclaiming the week of March 22nd through 28th, 2020 as Severe Weather Awareness and Flood Safety Awareness Week in Delaware County.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Good morning, Commissioners. Sean Miller, Director, Delaware County Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. This resolution before you is recognition of the statewide Severe Weather Awareness Week as well as Flood Awareness Week. And with regard to the severe weather awareness, it is unfortunately underscored the importance of preparedness with the recent events in Tennessee where at least 25 people lost their lives. And nighttime tornadoes are particularly dangerous because people are in their beds asleep, and bringing it a little bit closer to home. Last year in the Dayton area, as a result of that tornado outbreak, one of the issues there, a gentleman lost his life. I believe it was the only fatality, but he was in his bed at night when that tornado struck. And so having the methods in place to notify you of pending severe weather is very important. So establishing how you'll know and where you'll go is very important. So what I mean by that is having multiple methods in place for severe weather notification. And thankfully, we live in a day and age where there are numerous options in place. Of course, in Delaware County, we have Delco alerts. Nationwide, we have wireless emergency alerts. There are numerous third-party apps, both through FEMA, the Red Cross, as well as weather alert radios. So there are numerous methods in place for that. Additionally, with regard to flooding, the message that the National Weather Service always tries to stress is turn around, don't drown. And if you encounter a flooded roadway, it is best to just take the extra 5 minutes, find an alternate route. And recently in Delaware County, we've had several instances where people drive into a flooded roadway, their car stalls out, and public safety has to come out and rescue them. So when motorists drive through flooded roadways, they're not only putting themselves and their passengers in harm's way, but also first responders who have to come out and potentially rescue them. So that is kind of the high-level view of this Severe Weather Awareness Week and Flood Awareness Week. And the governor typically issues a very similar proclamation to this as well to encourage that personal preparedness. And one of the aspects of this is on the 25th of March at 9:50 a.m., there is a statewide outdoor warning siren drill, which is another way just to bring awareness to this initiative. And with me today is Brian Gallagher, Director of Safety and Security, and he's going to briefly touch on the internal aspects of that drill on the 25th of March.
Good morning, Commissioners. As we've done in the past, we will, the county buildings will partake in the statewide drill. So those offices that can partake, we would ask them to do so. We've done this in the past, so that way people know where to seek shelter in county buildings. Those that can't, for example, if there's a court session that's going on, during the evolution, they can't partake. Just for those offices to think about where they would go and take a look at where they would go. And if any office has any questions, give me a call, give me an email, and I will make sure that the staff understands where they need to go. For the most part, I think we're pretty well covered because we've been doing this for several years now.
I assume 911 wouldn't be affected by it either.
Say again?
911, I assume, wouldn't be affected by it either.
Yes, we would want 911 to stay in place, and Patrick does an excellent job of making sure that they practice going to alternate sites
Right,
and,
he does that.
operating, outside of the center.
And with that, we'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Don't really have any questions, comments, I guess would be just thank you for doing this, and the 25th drill, it's always good to, every once in a while, annually, practice, make sure we're aware.
The sirens sound statewide, which is just a great way to bring attention to it. And the more we practice these things, both as a county and individuals, I think the better off we'll be.
Okay. Glad to do that. We'll take a vote.
Vote on motion 20-214. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Resolution number 20-215, in the matter of approving supplemental appropriations for the Delaware County Emergency Management Agency.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion? Vote? Vote. We're going to have a discussion.
This supplemental appropriation is for a grant that we receive pretty much every year. It's an 80-20 match, which is terrific. So it's 80% federal, 20% non-federal. The Fire Chiefs Association has already agreed to take up the 20% non-federal match, and as such, there will be no cost burden to emergency management. It will simply be a pass-through for us, and the grant project entails hazardous materials training for fire departments that is very safety-based. It's based on their meters, what they're seeing. Can they go in and effect a safe line-of-sight rescue in a hazardous materials incident? And very similar training, very similar project to what we have done in recent years as well.
Good. Vote.
Vote on motion 20-215. Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill? Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
guys.
Resolution number 20-216, in the matter of authorizing the use of a procurement card for Record Center.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Good morning. Chris Shaw, Records Coordinator for Delaware County. We have been using other departments' P cards, so we thought it might be more efficient after talking with Don to get one for the Record Center.
Okay. Vote.
Vote on motion 20-216. Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Resolution number
quick.
20-217, in the matter of approving a services agreement with Kendrick Excavating Incorporated for sanitary sewer main repairs at point of sanitary service connection located at 24 Hidden Ravines Drive.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Morning, Commissioners. Tiffany Mag, Director of Environmental Services. So this is an agreement with Kendrick Excavating for us to repair a sewer main line. It's a 15-inch clay sewer. The reason that this was identified was there was a commercial user that had a lateral that they were having some backups in their building, and they basically asked us if they could go ahead and just repair their line on their lateral. So we went ahead and did closed-circuit televising of the main line first to make sure that there were no issues in our pipe before they started digging on their lateral, and identified that there was a broken pipe at the connection with their lateral. So we're going to repair ours first, that broken main line, and then allow them to repair their lateral so they stop having backups.
Okay, vote.
Vote on motion 20-217. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Resolution number 20-218, in the matter of accepting sanitary sewer improvements for Liberty Trace Section 2, Phase 1, Smith Farm at Carpenter's Mill, Section 2, Phase A, Heather's at Gulf Village, Section 4, and Howard's Farm, Section 1, Phases A and B.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion?
So all of these have been installed to meet all of our requirements at the sewer district. Liberty Trace Section 2 is a 24-lot subdivision that's located on Liberty Road near Home Road. And then Smith Farm is 22 lots at Stites Road, just north of Rutherford Road. And then Heather's at Gulf Village is 20 lots, that's on Sawmill Parkway, just north of Home Road. And Howard Farms is 44 lots, and that's on Cheshire, just west of Old State.
All right, vote.
Vote on motion 20-218. Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Thank you,
Tiffany?
Tiffany.
Resolution number 20-219, in the matter of reappointing members to the Concord Scioto Community Authority Board of Trustees.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Good morning, Commissioners. Jane Hawes, Director of Communications. We have before you the reappointment of members to the Concord Scioto Community Authority Board of Trustees. Graciela Chanfrau and David Fahrenholtz are interested in being reappointed, and we recommend their approval.
I'd just like to say thank you for their service, their willingness to serve again.
Yes.
Yep, a lot more coming in that area, so
Yes.
gonna be busy.
That's right. That's right.
All right, vote.
Vote on motion 20-219. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill? Mr. Benton.
Aye.
Resolution number 20-220, in the matter of approving a letter of support for Preservation Parks, Delaware County's proposal to the U.S. Board of Geographic Names to designate a currently unnamed stream in Delaware County as McCammon Creek.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
This is a very interesting request we had from Preservation Parks. If you recall, the Ohio Bicentennial Barn that you can see from I-71 between the Polaris and the 3637 exit on the west side of 71, that is sort of the center of the McCammon family property that's been in their family for 4 generations. Preservation Parks has been in the process of acquiring all the property around it to turn it into one of their future parks. And as part of the process, because they would like to name the park after the McCammons, they want to name a stream that runs through there, McCammon Creek. And in order to do that, you have to present a proposal to this U.S. Board on Geographic Names. And having the support of elected officials bolsters their case. So
Is it currently unnamed, or?
it is currently unnamed, yes.
Currently unnamed.
Yeah.
When they
We're
get
trying to give it a
anonymous,
name.
yeah, creek.
They'll have to get a little sign there, so
I know,
people
yeah.
can really appreciate it now.
This is a really great spot for a park. It's
Oh,
going to
yeah.
be beautiful ground, great location. I mean, so I think it's neat. So if we can name a stream and make that happen, we'll be glad to.
Yep.
So take a vote.
Vote on motion 20-220. Mr. Benton.
Aye.
Mr. Merrill.
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis.
Aye.
Thank you.
Resolution number 20-221, in the matter of establishing a new organization key and approving a supplemental appropriation for economic development.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Good morning, Commissioners. Karen First, Fiscal Manager, stepping in for Economic Development today. They're all at a conference. This resolution is to establish the new org key and the supplemental appropriations for the 2020 CDBG grant.
Good. Vote.
Vote on motion 20-221. Mrs. Lewis.
Aye.
Mr. Merrill.
Aye.
Mr. Benton.
Aye.
That brings us to administrative reports.
I have nothing to report.
Commissioner Lewis.
I went to the 2020 NACO Legislative Conference in D.C. It was a good meeting, and I'm on the Justice and Public Safety Committee, and so we passed some good resolutions. It really is important that we look at, everything that's sent to us as far as the resolutions that they wish to be passed. So I found one thing in this one resolution, and we were able to work it out, and it's great, and it's fine now, and so it was worth the trip. That's it.
Okay.
To your point, I serve on Immigration ELU, and it's interesting how different parts of the country look at things
Yes.
differently.
Yes.
And if you don't have a voice there,
Yes, that's right.
you can end up going a direction your region may not feel comfortable going.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And some areas speak louder than others.
Yes.
So, I attended the Corsa convention this weekend, and my first time as a new board member, and that is the property and liability coverage. 66 counties in our state get their coverage through Corsa. I learned a lot. It was a long, tedious 3 days, but it was informative. I can't say all the speakers were as good as, it's hard because you're talking a lot about ratios and mathematics and how you come to rates, and sometimes it's hard to make that a exciting topic. But some did it better than others. But I learned a lot, and just an opportunity to meet my fellow board members who I really didn't know very well. And as we work to keep his rates as low as possible, but make sure we have proper coverage in our state. and
No,
our
it's
county.
important, definitely.
That's all I have.
Just a couple other things, actually a few other things. We had our legislative update on Friday, and Representative Carfagna and Senator Brenner were there, and the main topic we talked about actually was coronavirus. Sheila Hiddleston was there and brought us up to date on that. So I would urge everyone who's got questions, et cetera, to stay in close contact with the Delaware County General Health District. They're on top of it. They're producing information, sharing it, and so on. So that would be the best resource, I think, as this thing, again, continues to be a big, big issue and affecting a lot of things like the Arnold event down in Columbus. The other topics at the legislative meeting were the capital budget, state capital budget, still looking good at this point. That won't be, still looking good for the grandstand grant, as well as some of the others, I think, will be given as well. But anyway, not till the end of March is when that's going to be finalized. But they're very much aware of our requests and supportive of it, so I think that's moving forward. Scott Sanders mentioned that the census, online census, taking whatever, you can fill out your census information online. That website goes live on March 12th. So that's how they're going to try to generate more and more of that versus the door-to-door efforts or the mailing. So anyway, just FYI. MORPC's this afternoon, the executive committee, they're featuring, MORPC is doing a series of sessions on various entrepreneur centers from around Central Ohio. Delaware County is being featured tomorrow. The Delaware City, County, and Ohio Wesleyan Entrepreneur Center is being featured tomorrow at 11 on MORPC's.
At MORPC location, or
I think it's all online.
all online?
Is that the way it is?
I believe on their
Yeah.
Facebook page.
Yeah, so they're doing an expose on the Delaware one tomorrow at 11. So you can watch that. There's a lot going on there. As you know, you're on that board. So land bank meeting we had last week that is moving along. SEBCO, I met Friday. We had our SEBCO board meeting Friday. I think we all struggled with the dependent audit, the dependent eligibility audit that did not go well last fall. They've since let the firm that did that work was let go. So I think SEBCO understood that was not well done, and they're going to look at new alternatives going forward. So that was one takeaway from the SEBCO board meeting. Got a One Columbus investor update tomorrow morning at 8:30 at the Renaissance Hotel. Bob Lamb's working with, well, actually, One Columbus put it on, but our economic development team will be there for that. We have the Township Association meeting this evening at 6 at the barn at Stratford there. And Brian Rivers is heading that up, and I think that's a really neat effort. He's bringing all the townships together to talk about issues that the townships are interested in. And one other thing that just is remarkable for you non-bankers out there, probably won't mean that much, but the 10-year U.S. Treasury is under 1%. For the first time in history.
Really?
Yeah. 10-year, so if you want to buy treasury bonds and commit to the 10-year, you're going to earn less than 1% on your money.
Oh, my gosh,
That-
yeah.
So anyway, that'll ripple through with mortgages and other borrowings and so on. So again, I think it's all tied to this coronavirus panic.
Oh, gee.
So in theory, credit card rates should come down, in theory.
Yeah, credit card rates tend to be fixed. They don't pay a whole lot of attention to U.S. Treasury rates.
Sarcastic.
Yeah. So anyway, we do have need for executive session. You have something, another
When you
comment?
said coronavirus, that reminded me that we did have the chief medical officer of the CDC speak to us, and he mentioned the importance of going through the general health district in our respective counties. And our general health district, when you look online too, and I've got it posted on my Facebook, but they have a lot of great information on the coronavirus. So any questions you have, just go to the general health district, or you can look on my Facebook, whatever. So.
Just a point of a little humor. I read somewhere the other day, the last few days, Corona beer sales are down 30%.
Oh.
That's
Up or down?
Down.
yeah. Oh, because people associate
Coronavirus.
I read that too. Yeah.
so just amazing.
Yeah. So with that, we do have need for executive session.
We do. Resolution number 20-222, and the matter of adjourning into executive session for consideration of appointment of a public employee or public official to consider the sale of property at competitive bidding for pending or imminent litigation for collective bargaining.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, vote?
Vote on motion 20-222. Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye. All right, we're in executive session.
Resolution number 20-223, in the matter of adjourning out of executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, vote?
Vote on motion 20-223. Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye. Okay, with that, we are now adjourned.